Think about the clothes you're wearing, the food you're eating, or even the furniture in your home. There is a story and history associated with every product you've ever bought. Unfortunately, sometimes the workers who make your products are subjected to terrible working conditions, are not treated fairly, or the manufacturing process is harmful to the environment. There are many forms of modern slavery and damaging production methods, but it's up to us, industry leaders and the consumers themselves, to take a stand so that we can contribute to a healthier planet and to changing the lives of everyone involved across the global supply chains for the better. Ethical Trade Alliance enables buyers to make informed choices on all of the products they purchase.
Hello, welcome to Women in Trade. I'm Sophie Krantz. Joining us today we have Rachel Burgess, an expert in competition law and with a rich working history in different parts of the world, including Southeast Asia. And we also will be going to Hobart and talking to Jill Saunders, the founder of Beauty and the Bees. Rachel, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sophie.
Rachel, you're a lawyer, a law lecturer, a researcher and a consultant with an extensive experience in the public and private sectors in Australia, the UK and Asia Pacific. And so what I'd love to know about is your background. How did you get into the work that you've done in the last few years?
Yeah, I guess it's not really a traditional career path, is it, for a lawyer? And when you put it all like that, it sounds very untraditional. I really feel really privileged, actually, Sophie. I spent a lot of time in private practice and in government, but found myself living in Malaysia. And it was there that I started doing consultancy work with the then very, very new Malaysian Competition Commission. And I just loved it. I really enjoyed the opportunity to work with them in an area of law that was new for them, but obviously something that was established in other parts of the world. And I brought that experience from other parts of the world, but learned so much working with the new regime. And it was from there that I continued to do this sort of consultancy work across the ASEAN region. So I've worked with a number of the ASEAN competition agencies as well as some of the regional networks there, and it's something I feel really fortunate to do. So I have a real affection for ASEAN, built from living there and working there for so long, and since coming back to Australia, really see so many opportunities for Australia in that region, and I'm sure we can talk about that today.
Yeah, wonderful. Let's looking at growing internationally, growing a business internationally, what are the main competition-related challenges that businesses face? What do you see coming up most of the time?
Yeah, I mean, in the ASEAN region, I think three things spring to mind. Firstly, the different legal systems that operate across ASEAN. I'll come back to that. The second big issue I see is the predominance of state-owned enterprises still in some parts of the region. And the last thing is probably the issue of corruption, which is still there, unfortunately, in some parts of the region, although there's a lot of work being done to eradicate corruption and a lot of work that Australia is doing to help in that area. So I don't think we need to say a lot more about that. But going back to the first two, the legal systems are quite different in the ASEAN region. Some of them are common law based, so familiar to Australians, Singapore and Malaysia are a couple. But even those systems are slightly different, as you would expect. The laws are slightly different and the way in which they're enforced is slightly different. And that means that I guess as an Australian business going into these countries, you're less familiar with the legal system and also perhaps have less confidence in the legal system. There may be examples that you've heard of where businesses have had trouble getting resolution to contract disputes and the like. So that can really, I think, hamper people's confidence in going into the region. The state-owned enterprises there are still a number of the ASEAN regions that have, or ASEAN jurisdictions that have a large number of state-owned enterprises. From a competition law point of view, I see some real encouraging steps in this area, because the new competition laws, and something that your audience may not be aware of, is that now there are 9 out of 10 of the ASEAN member states that have competition laws operational. And the final one, Cambodia, is due to be passed next year. I've seen the law. It's a great law. So we should have some really good, robust competition laws in operation in the region, and that will really help to level the playing field. The laws are intended in most of the jurisdictions to apply to the state-owned enterprises as well. So it means that businesses going in should be able to compete on a level playing field with those state-owned enterprises.
Fantastic. What a great development, and to increase, of course, the confidence of businesses, particularly Australian businesses heading into the region. And when we think of Asia and free trade agreements, a term that pops up from time to time is the noodle bowl, because there are so many different trade deals across the region. And from a competitiveness perspective, what are the key elements of trade deals and free trade agreements that businesses should be mindful of?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of free trade agreements in existence, and they permeate every aspect of business, don't they? We were actually negotiating a regional cooperation framework between the competition agencies, and one of the first questions was how does RCEP fit with this? Because there's so many interoperational ideas or overlaps. I think the point for your audience here is that. Really interestingly, there's become quite a trend to have competition chapters in free trade agreements, which is fantastic for business, because this gives a real recognition of the importance of a competitive market for business and for trade. So that's really fantastic news. Those competition chapters usually encourage the enforcement of competition laws, and perhaps even more importantly, encourage cooperation between the signatory parties, so that where there's a cross-border cartel, where there's cross-border mergers, we have cooperation amongst the member states or the signatories.
Yeah, fantastic. And businesses that are looking to grow internationally, often front of mind is the cost and complexity of doing so. And they may indeed be afraid that the competitive landscape is not free and fair. And yet, at a time of economic contraction around the world, it's never really been more important to look at overseas opportunities. And so from your perspective, what are 3 practical and actionable steps that businesses can take to have greater levels of certainty and comfort with looking at international markets?
I think there's 3 really simple things. Do the market research, sort of stating the obvious, but don't assume that a market is hard to get into. Figure out what opportunities there are in the market. I would say have a look at what the best distribution channels might be for your goods or services, because there may be some already established, multinational corporations that you could tap into. And I think utilise the knowledge that exists in Australia already. Australia has a wealth of knowledge about the ASEAN region, which I think, needs to be shared as much as possible, and tap into that and make the most of it.
And of course, we know that 2020 was quite the year. A lot of disruptions, geopolitical headwinds in several parts of the world affecting international business and indeed trade flows. You and I have both spent time working with government, and you've touched on that. Government agencies around the world who make a very much a concerted effort to strengthen their institutions to ensure international, or to enhance international economic integration. And I've personally found governments to be very supportive of business, of their businesses to go out in the world, but of course to welcome businesses to come into their markets. And of course, this enables faster, easier, cheaper internationalisation. What's your experience been?
Oh, very similar, I think, Sophie. You know, I think about the work that I've done in the ASEAN region, and it's with governments or international organisations supporting local governments who are trying to make markets competitive, not just for the local businesses, but also for their, you know, for foreign businesses, because there's a recognition that welcoming foreign businesses into the countries is good for everybody. You know, it grows the economy for everybody. We're just finishing up a project at the moment, actually, with the UN, really focused on the pandemic. How do we recover from the pandemic, particularly in some of the more developing countries, and focusing on how competition policy and law itself can support re-entry or sustained participation, particularly for small business, because we all know that small business is a key part of trade. So there's some really fascinating work going on at the moment, you know, coming out of what has been, as you say, not a great year, but some really important work being done to support business out of the current situation.
Yeah, fantastic. We are, of course, looking towards 2021. There remains a fair amount of uncertainty. But what's your year looking like? What are you looking forward to in the year ahead?
Oh, I think I have to say the T word, which isn't trade in this case, but travel. I really hope that, you know, certainly sometime next year or very shortly thereafter, we can resume travel. I miss travel. I miss being able to go up into ASEAN and work there. And I really can't wait to reunite with friends and colleagues up there, and just to learn really a lot more about this beautiful part of the world and keep working there.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me, Sophie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. We're going to take a break, and when we get back, we will be joined by Jill Saunders, the founder of Beauty and the Bees.
Think about the clothes you're wearing, the food you're eating, or even the furniture in your home. There is a story and history associated with every product you've ever bought. Unfortunately, sometimes the workers who make your products are subjected to terrible working conditions, are not treated fairly, or the manufacturing process is harmful to the environment. There are many forms of modern slavery and damaging production methods, but it's up to us, industry leaders and the consumers themselves, to take a stand so that we can contribute to a healthier planet and to changing the lives of everyone involved across the global supply chains for the better. Ethical Trade Alliance enables buyers to make informed choices on all of the products they purchase.
Hello, welcome back. We're now going to Hobart, where we will be talking to Jill Saunders, the founder of Beauty and the Bees. Jill, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Jill, you have a very interesting story. Looking at how you founded your business, you've connected a need with family history and, of course, an opportunity. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, when I grew up, my grandmother used to make all these repulsive herbal remedies. I thought so at the time, of course, because I, like all teenagers in the late 60s, early 70s, I just wanted all the shiny stuff in tubes. But in my 20s, I developed severe eczema, and I was in a sales job. I've always been in marketing and publishing, and it just got to the point where I had to do something about it. So I rediscovered my grandmother's old formulae and sort of adapted them, and I was very successful in actually curing my own eczema. And the secret lay obviously in Tasmania. I came here traveling and I found the most pristine environment available, and of course the purest beeswax and honey in the world, leatherwood, that only exists here. Which research-wise they're actually discovering is very much like Manuka, but I could have told them that. One smell and one taste and you understand immediately how amazing it is.
Wonderful. And so you cured your own ailment, and then a business was born.
Yes, I just decided, look, I was making it for family and friends, and I thought this is an ideal opportunity to actually turn this into a business opportunity. So I started down at Salamanca Market on my motorbike and with everything packed on it, like one of those Balinese rice cracker sellers that you see when you go to Asia, with everything packed onto it. So I started down at Salamanca Market, and it's grown to a business that actually employs 12 to 15 people now. So I'm quite proud of becoming an employer.
Absolutely. And you are based down in Tasmania, and yet you do export your products around the world. How did you build up your business how have you become an exporter? Did you start with international markets in mind, or did that grow over time?
No, I did start with export in mind, because when I came to Tasmania, and in fact, for the 28 years or 29 years I've been in business, there has been no appreciation within Australia and certainly in Tasmania about what this place is and how special it is. And of course, coming from the outside, I saw that straight away. There are so many resources here that can be used. And of course, I was the only one making natural skincare in glass jars 28 years ago, and people didn't really understand natural skincare. They thought it was some kind of voodoo. But the thing is, export markets knew that very well. It just wasn't developed in Australia. So I was looking towards export. Of course, there was a great deal of peddling that had to be done over that 25 years to get to a size and critical mass where the product was taken seriously. So then I met my US partner about 14 years ago, actually. And about 8 years ago, he decided to bring it into the US, which is our primary sales market now.
Wonderful. And if you didn't export, if you had started business 29 years ago and focused purely on the domestic market, what would your business look like today, do you think?
I think it would be struggling. Really struggling, because there just isn't enough critical mass in Australia to get a brand to a massive level. I mean, any brand that is successful, a bit like, dare I say it, Australians themselves, they seem to, in the past, have an inferiority complex and go abroad to succeed, and those that come back were seen as successful. For me, I realized that the beauty and clarity and cleanliness of Tasmania and its unique resources would only be viewed really successfully from the outside. And so that's why I drove it to be an export product. We started exporting actually to Kuwait, to an apitherapy center in Kuwait about 15 years ago. And that sort of really gave us a bit of a kick along as far as export's concerned. And then my partner Nat came along, and with 330 million people in the US, we only need 10 zeros with a 1, and we're sorted. We already sell more to the US than we do domestically.
Interesting, very interesting. Tasmania is a relatively isolated part of the world in geographic terms, and we've all become more isolated. 2020 was a year of being isolated, of course, international travel restrictions and so on. What has 2020 looked like for you?
It's been our best year ever. We've increased our turnover by 25%. It's been the biggest year we've ever had. And we just cannot make it fast enough,
Right. And why is that? Why the uptake in 2020?
I think the Amazon, because we sell on Amazon in the US, absolutely exclusively on Amazon, there's just been a massive drive towards authenticity, is that people are having trust issues, not only in their president, but going down the food chain to people who want to have something authentic. And since we've got a 30-year history of doing what we say we do and also showing results, we've got thousands of reviews, and with people have built generations of trust in the product, and it's just coming to, again, a critical mass that we can capitalize on. The history of the business, the fact that we're still around after all these years. People have learned to trust us. We've got people coming into the store and shopping online that their mothers bought their mother-to-be products from us. Then they bought the baby products, and now their children are buying from us. So it's a question of longevity, really.
Yes, absolutely.
And quality.
And quality. And you mentioned trust, and you also mentioned the attraction to, or the attraction to you of Tasmania when you arrived those years ago. How important is brand Tasmania and the global recognition of Tasmania being clean and green? How important is it to your business today?
Well, the strange thing is that Tasmania honestly doesn't have any part in exports, really. They just regard it as an Australian product. And in fact, we're going through a massive rebrand and relaunch at the present time and completely creating a new identity for the business, which will be domestically badged. Tasmania will still have Tasmania on the label. So for us within Australia, there is growing recognition, of course, of Tasmania. We're actually beating people off with a stick coming to the island, as you know. People are fleeing here. But internationally, Tasmania just doesn't exist. It is part of Australia. That's all they know. We could be Tanzania, you know. They don't really recognise, because America really is the Flat Earth Society, you know, they don't sort of recognise outside their country. But Australia as a generic identity is hugely well valued for clean and fresh and safe. And of course, when they get to our website, they can then drill down and find out the story about Tasmania, which is even more special. So it takes some education to get them to understand that this place exists, really.
Absolutely. And Jill, in 2019, Beauty and the Bees won the Tasmanian Export Award under the sustainability category. And is sustainability something, as you see, as a cost or a strategic benefit to your business?
Well, I think for us, it's just, I suppose, a bit like the walls of the house or the paint on the wall. It's just always, in other words, we started off that way. It started off with me going through Southeast Asia, you know, many times through the years on the way back to Britain. I travelled extensively over the past 30 years, going back what I then regarded as home. And you'd always be wading in rubbish in Bali, for example, on the way through, which is extremely depressing. And I vowed to myself always from the very beginning of the business that we wouldn't do it any other way. So we've saved millions of packages, you know, 2 to 3 million packages over that period of time from landfill, and it's just a non-negotiable. So the fact that it's fashionable now, and we pioneered zero waste in the skincare business worldwide, is, I suppose, just non-negotiable, you know, and it just happens to be fashionable now. But for us, we would never consider anything else. We've always used only tin, glass, paper, or wood, you see. And so that's the way we've always done business. But now, yes, it is a sustainable advantage. But businesses struggle within Australia to find sustainable packaging. It's always a very difficult exercise in Australia because there are not enough, B2B consumers to buy sustainable packaging, and it's much more expensive.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, what a challenge.
It is a challenge, yeah.
And Jill, you are an inspiration to businesses looking to grow internationally. A sustainable, or a business based on sustainability. You know, you've held tight to your values. You had the intention to grow internationally from the beginning, and so you are an inspiration. And what, in your mind, what are 3 practical and actionable things that business leaders and owners can do in 2021 to grow a business internationally?
I think you need to tell a story. You need to tell the story of who you are. The most important thing is adopting video, which we've done from the very beginning. We actually found a filmmaker locally, David Pyefinch, who's fantastic. Got to get a plug in for David. He's absolutely fantastic. And so we're very lucky to have someone so skilled here. But it's telling a story, really, at the end of the day, that you need to be authentic, because unfortunately, or fortunately actually, I believe, in this day and age, everything is transparent and you need to be truthful. you know, and also have all your ducks in a row, have all the paperwork sorted, you know. We will be, for example, you're moving some of our production to Melbourne because we need to meet international demands. We can't do that in Tasmania. There is no TGA certified facility here, for example. So you need to have all of your paperwork sorted. You need to know what the market needs, but most importantly, someone on the ground in the country of target, you know. So in the US, things are done very differently, very, very differently. In other words, so differently that you and I could not embrace that. We would need to be an American to understand that culture. And that's where I'm very lucky with my soon-to-be business partner, Nat Rue, who is exceptionally good at what he does. And he knows the market well. And you also need to spot niches and exploit them. I mean, business is business, and you need to find what that country needs and deliver it if you can, with excellence. I mean, and customer service is extremely important. Locally or with export, you need to absolutely service the customer to death. Make sure that you can deliver, because export markets are very unforgiving. You need to be able to deliver on your promises. So that's really important, and manage expectations extremely well.
Great advice, Jill. And given that you've had 25% growth this year, that's clearly a strategy that's working for your business.
Yes.
And looking at 2021, what is in store for Beauty and the Bees?
Well, exponential growth, because we believe that our new identity, because things get tired after a number of years, you know, and our new identity, I think, is going to take us into new markets, new packaging. So we will, and again, environmentally friendly packaging like aluminium tubes, for example. We will never use plastics. So I think the future is extremely bright for us because, again, we've got the authenticity, the brand delivers, it says what it does on the packet, you know, and I think really the sky's the limit, particularly as far as the US is concerned. Now that Biden is in power, which we're not going to go into, but now that he's in power, I think there is going to be a new optimism in the US, or a return to optimism anyway. But our sales haven't fallen there. In fact, they've increased. So, yes, with the new brand and new horizons, I think it's a very, very bright future, and particularly for Tasmania. You mentioned brand Tasmania. Yes, they have reinvented themselves most satisfactorily. They didn't really have we couldn't really get anything out of them in the past, but now it looks as though we may be able to work together to really start to brand Tasmania as it should be. As I've, said through the years, this is a beautiful place. It needs to have its own brand and carry that through in all its messaging.
Well, Jill, congratulations on your success, not only this year, but particularly this year. And yes, we wish you all the very best for 2021. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, you're welcome. If there's anything else I can do to help, if people want to send me messages or whatever it is through this medium, I'm not sure what you do. I'm obviously happy to help if I can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks very much.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of Women in Trade.
Think about the clothes you're wearing, the food you're eating, or even the furniture in your home. There is a story and history associated with every product you've ever bought. Unfortunately, sometimes the workers who make your products are subjected to terrible working conditions, are not treated fairly, or the manufacturing process is harmful to the environment. There are many forms of modern slavery and damaging production methods, but it's up to us, industry leaders and the consumers themselves, to take a stand so that we can contribute to a healthier planet and to changing the lives of everyone involved across the global supply chains for the better. Ethical Trade Alliance enables buyers to make informed choices on all of the products they purchase.